Pakistanis kidnapping Indians overseas. Before you start wondering what's going on, let me get you the details. It's a shocking story. Turkish police have arrested 3 Pakistanis on charges of kidnapping an Indian citizen. Let me say that again. 3 Pakistanis have been arrested by the Turkish police on charges of kidnapping an Indian citizen. What really happened? According to a report by the Kama press news agency, Turkish police said that the kidnappers demanded 2 million Indian rupees from the family of the Indian. That's equivalent to $24,000. And who is this Indian? According to Turkish media, the Indian who was kidnapped had come to Turkey for work. He was working at a restaurant in Istanbul. So what happened? How was he kidnapped? According to the story by the Kama press news agency, reports say that 3 Pakistani asylum seekers lured the Indian to the city of Edirne. It's a city in the northwest of the country. They did this under the pretext of securing him a job at a translation company and then, as per the report, abducted him. What happened then? Was he rescued? Yes, he was. And let's tell you how. As per the Kama press news agency report, security authorities rescued the man after a friend of his contacted the police. The report also saying that according to the police, the kidnappers threatened his family by sending them a video and that they had tied his hands and feet. I know this is a lot to take in, and there are a series of questions. Why was the Indian targeted? Why was he targeted in particular? Did the kidnappers have some locals helping them? The report by the Kama press news agency says a Turkish citizen with a criminal record has been arrested on charges of providing shelter to the kidnappers. It also says that, as per reports, during the police operation, an unlicensed firearm, 4 pistols and a sum of money were discovered and seized. Like I said, there are a series of question marks here, more so because this is not an isolated case. Let me tell you about what happened in Cambodia. As per a report in Khmer Times, 2 Pakistani men who kidnapped 2 Indian nationals and held them for 3 weeks in order to extort a ransom have been arrested in the capital of Cambodia. The report said that police freed the Indian men who had been detained from 25th of April to May 16. It added that the victims had been handcuffed, beaten and blindfolded during their ordeal. The report says that, as per the victims, the Pakistani suspects locked the door of their room and prevented them from leaving and confiscated their passports. The report adds that the suspects demanded ransom in exchange for their release and that their ordeal came to an end when the 2 victims shouted for help at a time when the 3 Pakistani suspects were not with them. Is there more to all of this than what meets the eye? These 2 cases surfacing around the same time raise serious concern and leave behind a lot of big questions. We will be tracking the developments very closely. Has Rishi Sunak committed political suicide? You see, he has announced early elections. Sunak had until January 2025 to name the day, by the way, but he has jumped the gun. The UK elections will now take place on the 4th of July. The whole of the UK is stunned. Why did Sunak do this? What were his reasons? Because it was assumed that Sunak would at least wait till autumn for the big announcement. Even if he lost, he would at least have the comfort of finishing 2 years at 10 Downing Street. So why now rather than October or even November? Is it an unlikely act of daring? maybe when you've had as much bad news as the UK Prime Minister, you may jump at the slightest hope of good fortune. On the morning of Sunak's election announcement, the Office for National Statistics announced that inflation is finally close to the 2% target. That means the Conservatives could go into the election with stable food prices and energy bills. The voters are finally feeling the impact of dual cuts to national insurance. Wages are perky, unemployment is relatively low. Sunak's Rwanda immigration scheme has also been passed. Moving now may spare him the embarrassment of an expected surge in boat crossings later in the summer. Is that what Sunak thought? There is one simple reason why a British Prime Minister would call a general election earlier than they have to. Because they know better than anyone else that things are going to get worse later, when they anticipate that their policies are going to fail in the future. With his announcement, Sunak has given up the chance to play the last few cards that some Tories hoped could help the party. His party is clearly unhappy with his decision. Tory members have branded the move a kamikaze election. They think the party is not ready to go to the polls, and they are right. The Tories are 20 points behind the opposition Labour Party in the polls. The early elections mean there will be no mini budget in early September. Some had seen that as the last roll of the dice. There will be no further cuts in taxes or national insurance contributions either. If there are interest rate cuts, they will come too late and will probably be too small to turn the mood around. Long story short, Tories' prospects to turn things around were grim to begin with. Now, the Prime Minister's decision has robbed them of a final push as well. All they have is 6 weeks to campaign. What can they possibly do to change the mood? Who was advising Sunak to take this call? This is the opposite of what Sunak's Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, had suggested. The man was brought in, remember, to talk some sense into Rishi Sunak. He endorsed plans to wait until later in the year for an election. The decision of early elections was so secret that even Sunak's Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, appeared surprised. Only last week, he had suggested he might again reduce payroll taxes in an autumn fiscal statement. All of that has gone down the drain now. Sunak was thought to be competent. It was his USP after the Johnson shambles and the Liz Truss catastrophe. But whatever he has done after taking office has only contradicted that theory. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has taken the opportunity, by the way, to launch attacks at Sunak. He said that the Conservatives are drifting to defeat and Sunak is offering voters nothing to rally behind. And he might not be wrong after all. There is an old saying in British politics: the Conservative Party is ruthless in its pursuit of power. But as of now, it seems relentlessly focused on losing it. In all of modern British political history, there has been only one July general election. It was back in 1945. Unlike now, many had assumed it would produce a Conservative victory. Instead, it ended in the most iconic Labour landslide win of the 20th century. Clement Attlee led his party to a 145-seat majority after Winston Churchill's Tories. What's going to happen during this year's July election? It might not be too difficult to guess. Ultra-processed food is ultra bad for you. Here on Gravitas, we have been raising alarm against these food items. And here we have another study that has made more shocking revelations. It's from Harvard. It has warned that eating ultra-processed foods can lead to stroke and cognitive impairment. Our next report telling you more.
A burger or a hot dog with extra cheese, French fries on the side, and a soda to go with it. Is that much different from your regular fast food order? Yes, it's tasty, no doubt about it. But is it worth the risks it brings along? All of the food items that we mentioned are ultra-processed. According to a new Harvard study, they can lead to stroke and cognitive impairment. Let us tell you a bit more about this study. It had 30,000 participants. All of them were 45 years or older. Researchers followed them for 11 years on an average. By the end of this period, 1,108 participants had a stroke. 768 were diagnosed with cognitive impairment. There's more. Participants who ate more ultra-processed foods than others had an 8% increase in stroke risk and 16% increase in the risk of developing cognitive impairment. Those who ate more whole foods, on the other hand, had a 9% decreased risk of stroke and 12% decreased risk of cognitive impairment. This isn't the first study raising alarm against ultra-processed food. In a large review of 45 studies, researchers found ultra-processed food consumption was linked to over 30 health conditions. Unfortunately, despite its ill effects, we're getting more and more dependent on these food products. The situation is really bad in the US. Ultra-processed foods are the main source of food eaten by Americans. They make up almost 58% of Americans' total calories. This is according to a 2020 study published in BMJ. What makes ultra-processed foods so bad for your health? They are typically made from extracted substances like fats, added sugars, and starches. These foods are put through many processes and contain many added ingredients. Examples of ultra-processed foods include soda, chips, candy, ice cream, hot dogs, cereal, fries, and canned soup. Processed foods are slightly different because even after being altered, they're not necessarily dangerous to our health. But when it comes to staying healthy in the long term, nothing beats whole foods.